Australia has over 130 citizens in Afghanistan working for the United Nations or NGOs and elsewhere. And according to Defence Minister Peter Dutton, we're working to bring them and their families home. 250 ADF members have been sent to secure their return. You've seen the pictures of what occurred in Kabul yesterday. It doesn't bear repeating, it was so appalling. So what's the government's plan? Well, Luke Howarth is the LNP member for Petrie. He's also the Assistant Minister for Youth and Jobs. Luke Howarth, what's the immediate job of the 250 personnel we're sending?
The immediate job of the 250 personnel is to bring any remaining people that have been locally engaged employees of the Australian military back to Australia, and anyone else, I guess, they feel has helped the Australian Defence Force or anyone else they can bring back, I'm sure they will.
Has US forces regained control of Kabul airport? Because apparently they took off not knowing if they could actually land there, so I think they're being diverted to the UAE or something like that before actually flying in.
Yeah, my understanding is that they have, that there's a few thousand United States military personnel on the ground at Kabul airport, and they've got that controlled, is my understanding, and that's why we're able to land planes and so forth.
What went wrong with our so-called planning to remove Australians and the people who have assisted us over the last 2 decades?
Well, we have removed some Australians, obviously, since we have removed some Afghanis, locally engaged employees. In fact, I think we've actually removed 1,800, and since April this year we've removed another 430. But I think, to be honest with you, Steve, no one expected the collapse of the Afghani army to happen at all, if not this quickly. I mean, Joe Biden, as we know, back in July, just last month, said that Afghani troops are well equipped and their air force, and there's 300,000 of them compared to considerably less Taliban fighters. And he was saying that, that there wouldn't be any circumstance where it would fall. But obviously it's fallen much quicker than what the US president thought and what our allies thought, which is really, really disappointing. As someone who went to Afghanistan with the Australian Defence Force parliamentary program several years ago, I went to Kabul and Kandahar, and so the last couple of days has really been quite distressing just for myself as a human being watching it, because it's a beautiful country and there's beautiful people there. So to see the Taliban take back over so quickly has been quite upsetting, and I know that everyone feels the same way, and many Australians would feel the same way. So, it's just really, really disappointing.
When you were there, did you get any indication that the Afghan Defence Force were not up to the job, or that the Taliban was simply biding their time?
No, so I went to the Australian National Headquarters in the Middle East, which is in Dubai. We have a military base there, which several other countries share. And I flew into Kandahar and Kabul on a Hercules C-130 flown by the Australian Air Force, with the Australian general that was there at the time and another couple of parliamentarians. We had a look at the training facilities that were being set up by the British and Australians and in Kandahar. And that was all about, this is 6 or 7 years ago, this was all about training the Afghani troops to be able to take over and after their legitimate elections to be able to manage the security of their country. And so that was 6 or 7 years ago. So, in the Australian Defence Force, they're really professionals, whether they're in Army, Air Force, Navy, they're all just professional people that really train people well. So, I'm not quite sure as to why the Afghani troops, have folded so quickly for whatever reason. I've heard that, some, pretty well just gave over their equipment to the Taliban and folded, which is just so disappointing. So,
well, as I understand it, the Afghani leadership was totally corrupt, and the moment trouble was sighted, they fled. So when the poor troops tried to call back to headquarters to find out that their leaders and their prime minister or their president had taken off, I mean, I'd do the same thing if that was my leadership. I'd say, crikey, well, what am I fighting for then?
Yeah, I mean, it it does go to show that, there's a lot of countries around the world where, the leadership is corrupt. They're there just to line their own pockets and what's in it for them as opposed to working for their people. And that's coming from Australia where, our political system isn't like that, regardless of who's in government. It's just really disheartening. We're very fortunate to live in Australia. As I said, Afghanistan was a beautiful country. We flew in just at the end of winter. You could see all the snow-capped mountains. I met several, whilst we had a Australian Defence Force heavily armed presence with us, we met quite a few local people, went through Kabul and Kandahar, met the ambassadors there. They were in a sort of a heavily fortified area. So, it's been quite distressing as a human being, as I say, just seeing that and thinking of all the good work that's been done over the last 20 years. I mean, obviously we went into Afghanistan as part of the United States, NATO and international community to find bin Laden after September 11 and to eliminate further terrorist attacks. But we also, ensured that women and girls received education, were able to work, had all the freedoms that they previously didn't have under the Taliban. And that's, I guess, my biggest disappointment.
Let's be honest here, though. The US coalition didn't go in there for feminist rights. The US did not.
They went in there to get bin Laden, no doubt about that.
Yeah, they didn't go in there the story changed over the years. They didn't go in there because they suddenly were worried about women in Afghanistan. They went in there.
They went in after September 11, 2001. That's why they wanted to get bin Laden, because the Taliban were, hiding bin Laden, and they were carrying out terrorist attacks around the world, including what happened on September 11, 2001. It was all, everything was linked. I mean, bin Laden was influencing a whole lot of other things, including, Bali and everything else that could affect Australians. So it was to reduce terrorism and to stop terrorism. That was the main reason why they went in there 2001. I mean, it was well before I was in Parliament. I was elected in 2013, but obviously you're right, the history there, Steve, for sure.
Now, is there any discussion?
It wasn't there just to help the women and children, but what I'm saying is that's been a big benefit over the last 20 years for those Afghani women and children, to be able to live that way.
But now I want to ask you this question. Is there any discussion at all on the backbench of federal parliament about why Australia keeps following the United States into invading other people's countries? Now, we've been doing it since the 1950s. Why do we keep doing it? We keep following the United States. They're not military. The military keeps winning, but they are political failures. They've never achieved their political aim, and this is another one. And this one was, oh my goodness, why do we keep... Is there any discussion?
I mean, if our allies, the United States and Britain, wanted to win a battle, you could level the joint, but that's not the way we work. We respect humans' rights and individuals. We want to look after the civilian community. So
my question is there any discussion on the backbench about why it is that Australia keeps following the United States? Ever since the 1950s we've been doing this, where we win militarily but lose politically.
I haven't heard a discussion on the backbench, but obviously I think Australia is indebted to the United States for what they did for us in World War II. Now, I wasn't born in World War II. 3 of my grandparents fought or served in World War II. I've now got a son in the Australian Defence Force now, but I think there's I guess there's gratitude for what the US did for us in World War II. And the reality is that our Australian Defence Force, where we don't have it's not mandatory for people to serve. It's a small defence force, and it's part of that ANZUS alliance is to try and support each other and to give back to, I guess, to help the US when they need it as well. It doesn't mean in the future that we always follow what they do, but I hear what you're saying. It's true that since World War II we have followed them into many a country. That's true.
Quick question from a listener, Justin, who says, why can the US aircraft land in Kabul, but we keep hearing that Australian aircraft can't? Do you know the reason for that?
Well, I think, Justin, the US aircraft landed yesterday, whereas ours have sort of been dispatched later. But I think you'll find... look, I'm not sure. I'd be speculating. My understanding is that they will land. It could have changed today that I'm not aware of, but I believe the US got in there earlier than what the Australian aircraft has left. So we all saw the pictures in the paper today of the C-17 loaded up with over 600 Afghanis and so forth in it. So I think they just got in there earlier than what the Australian Defence Force has done so.
All right, and we'll certainly see what happens. This is ABC Radio Brisbane. My guest is Luke Howarth. He's the federal LNP member for Petrie. He's the Assistant Minister for Youth and Jobs. It's coming up to 10 minutes to 5. It's nearly 10 minutes to 5. Just before I let you go, I just want to ask you something that's come up in federal parliament in relation to changes or planned changes to the Electoral Act. The government is planning to change the rules around the Electoral Act, assuming it gets passed, where minor parties have to have a membership base not of 500 members as it currently is, but lifted to 1,500 members to be considered a party. Why is the federal government doing this?
Well, I think it's to ensure that parties have appropriate amount of support. I mean, 1,500 members across all of Australia is not a lot of members. It's actually quite low, very low. I mean, even minor parties like the Greens and Pauline Hanson's One Nation would have well over 1,500 members throughout Australia. So the purpose of it, Bud, as everyone will know, when you go to vote, particularly at a federal election, and you get a Senate ballot paper form, you know, it's a metre long. And there's all these little minor parties on it, whether it's the Pirate Party or the Marijuana Party or whoever. I'm not sure who's on there. There's a whole range of them. And really, what do they stand for? Nobody knows.
Well, that's not for you to say. I mean, it's all very well for a government that's in power to say we will determine who's allowed to be a party or not. That's hardly fair.
The reality is, Steve, it's not we, it's the Parliament. So the Labor Party will they'll have to decide whether they support it. But my interest is there for the Australian people. I'm a member of the Liberal National Party. It's not up to me to get minor parties elected. I've got no interest in them doing so. I think they actually cause, quite frankly, a lot of problems. They're unable to make decisions. They blow in the wind, can't make a tough decision on anything when something's got to be made. And there's a lot of independents there, which are independents, mind you, not political parties.
All right.
Jackie Lambie is the independent member for Tasmania. Bob Catter is one member up in Kennedy. They're not
for Catter's Australia
Party. It's not unreasonable to ask him to get 1,500 people.
Well, he's a member of Catter's Australia Party. He's got a massive electorate but a small population. How's he supposed to meet a benchmark like this?
How's he supposed to what?
Meet a benchmark like this.
Well, as I said, 1,500 members is not a lot, but the reality is those two will not be affected in any way anyway.
Okay.
Because it does not affect sitting members. So if you're Jackie Lambie in Tasmania and you're a current senator, or you're Bob Catter, they are not affected. They still have what's the word? They're still registered as a party because they are actually sitting members. So why they're getting together and sort of trying to make a thing out of it, I've got no idea. But someone like...
Okay, look, I have to leave it there. I'm just going to run out of time. I'm sorry. Luke Howarth, thanks for coming on this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Luke Howarth is the LNP member for Petrie and Assistant Minister for Youth and Jobs.